mug cake, and it's a super simple recipe, but we're going to talk a little bit first about why a chocolate cake can be made a little healthier. And the reason for that is we're going to make some healthy substitutions compared to what you would normally put in a chocolate cake. We're going to make some substitutions that actually change it from more of a simple carbohydrate to a complex carbohydrate. And some of you are probably going, well, I don't know the difference. So we're going to talk about that first. I have a chart here that shows you the difference between simple and complex. Simple means that it breaks down really quickly. And if you think back to a few lessons ago when we talked about that blood sugar and those hills and valleys, how we're trying to make those hills and valleys smaller so that our blood sugar is more stable, that is what we're doing by making some healthy substitutions. Simple carbohydrates get into the bloodstream really quickly, and our body shoots out insulin immediately and tries to combat it to keep our blood sugar level. If we're a person that has insulin resistance, if we do that too many times, our pancreas gets angry and says, you know what, I'm tired of you overworking me and I'm not going to do this anymore. And suddenly we're being told by the doctor that we're pre-diabetic or diabetic. So by eating the right way, we can kind of prevent maybe that from happening in the future. So simple carbohydrates are things like candies, cake, soda, white bread, white potatoes sometimes if you make them the wrong way, French fries. They're simple carbohydrates. So we want to really limit these in our diet because they're not really that good for us. Complex carbohydrates usually are higher in protein, they're higher in fiber, they're higher in nutrient density, but they're also higher in just nutrients, minerals, and vitamins themselves. Complex carbohydrates are things like pumpkin. We made those pumpkin breakfast bars. Tomatoes, if we put tomatoes on our sandwiches. Green beans, carrots. If you think back last week, I used the example where I have had clients that don't want to eat a carrot because they're higher in sugar, but then they turn around and eat a candy bar. A carrot actually has good sugars, but it has a lot of fiber, so that sugar that's in there doesn't spike that blood sugar like you would think, okay? Another example are the sweet potatoes. We had sweet potatoes with our buffalo chicken. So sweet potatoes have a lot more vitamins, they have a lot more fiber, and a resistant starch, so then we don't get that spike. So when we add a protein to that, we have a really healthy, nutrient-dense meal. And then another example of a complex carb is chickpeas. Now, I have a nut allergy, so I'm going to substitute today and use chickpea flour, which is basically garbanzo beans ground up into a flour. So it's a healthy alternative to almond flour. So the almond flour or the chickpea flour are complex carbs. Chickpea flour has a few more carbohydrates, but it has 10 grams of protein in a serving. Almond flour only has 3 carbohydrates, but it also only has 3 grams of fiber in a serving. So depending on what your client needs, if you have a diabetic, you might want to substitute the almond flour because of the carbohydrate content. If you have somebody with an allergy, the chickpea flour might be a better option, okay? We're also going to go back to using a healthy sugar, which is the pure maple syrup, which is in a form that our body knows what to do with. Last week I mentioned there's lots of different names for sugar. So remember, anything that ends in OSE is a sugar when you're looking at those food labels. Anything with an OL at the end, and a couple of examples of that are mannitol and sorbitol. Those are sugar alcohols, and they typically put those in foods that are sugar-free for diabetics because the alcohols don't spike the blood sugar like a regular sugar would. But there's lactose, there's maltose, there's fructose, there's glucose, so anything OSE. But we have different sugars like maple syrup, barley malt, brown syrup, rice syrup, agave nectar. We have, let's see, what else? High fructose corn syrup. So there's some really unhealthy options of sugar, but then there are the healthier choices like the honey and the maple syrup. So we're making something a little healthier today, and it's only 1.5 minutes in the microwave, and it's a single serving. So we're going to use dark cocoa, again, high in antioxidants. We talked about that a few weeks ago. The more antioxidants we put in our diet, the better we fight those free radicals that can cause trouble within our body. One of those being inflammation. And our gut can get inflamed just like everything else, and that can affect our immune system because our immune system's in our gut, okay? I am going to be using coconut oil today. We also had a lesson on fat. I just brought a little sample from home, but coconut oil is technically a saturated fat. As you can see, it's a solid at room temperature. It's white. It smells really good. I buy it by the tub, and I use it on my face, I use it on my body, I use it in my food. I usually just have a big container of it on hand. But it smells really yummy, so at night you can put it on your face, and it feels wonderful. I also put a little bit in my hair. You can do whatever you want, okay? But that is a saturated fat, but it's actually a healthier option of fat. But remember, anything solid at room temperature means it's saturated, so we have to limit the amount that we use. Today, we're only using a teaspoon, okay? So let's go ahead and start making our cake, okay? I'm going to set that off to the side. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my coconut oil, and I'm going to use my teaspoon of it, and I'm going to put it in my coffee mug, just because I'm going to melt it in the microwave for just a few seconds. And the reason for that is it's a cake. It's going to stick to the pan. So by putting it in, let's see, seconds, start. By putting it in the coffee mug to melt it, we're coating the coffee mug so that our cake doesn't stick as much. And it doesn't take very long for it to melt. So again, it's still a solid at room temperature, so it is a saturated fat, but it has some good healthy properties. It's not quite there yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in there a little bit longer. So we're going to take our coconut oil and just leave it in there for now. Again, I'm taking chickpea flour instead of almond flour, and the recipe calls for 1/4 of a cup. 1/4 of a cup. So we're going to put that in our bowl. 2 tablespoons of dark cocoa. Now, we already talked about before everybody joined the meeting, we've got some that don't want cocoa because they don't like chocolate. So we're going to try, because we're experimenting, and that's part of what cooking is, they're going to try using just extra vanilla, and then they're also going to try using just a little bit of strawberry Nesquik just to see what happens, because we have to have options. But this would be a great place where we could take maybe that protein powder that we used a few weeks ago and substitute 2 tablespoons of that for the cocoa. It would give it extra vanilla, extra protein, so that would probably cut down on the carbs and the sugars again, so that the diabetics could probably eat it, okay? 2 tablespoons of cocoa, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. And as you can see, I'm mixing it in a different pan just because it gives me a little bit more stirring room. I've got 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then we're going to go ahead and mix in 1 egg. And we're just going to stir that up. And you want to mix it really well. And the more you mix it, the more it's going to start looking like chocolate cake. I'm going to go ahead and stir in my coconut oil, and just keep stirring it until it forms a batter, okay? So you kind of got to use a little bit of elbow grease. Everybody mixing? All right, and then once it starts to form a really solid mixture, you get that egg all folded in there. Kind of got to use a little bit of elbow grease. It's going to look a little bit thick, but that's okay. You're going to go ahead and transfer it to your coffee mug. And then we're going to cook it in the microwave for 1.5 minutes. Every microwave's a little bit different, so you're going to have to play with it a little bit. Once it's in the microwave, as you watch, if you watch it, it's going to look like a souffle. It's going to pop way up above the coffee mug. That's okay. Once you pull it out, it'll kind of come back down, and then you'll have a single serving size of chocolate cake, or whatever version you guys are trying over there. Now, what we do at my house is it's a single serving, but my husband and I will split it in half because we just don't need a whole cake. To give you the calories, because they asked for it earlier, this serving of this is 433 calories if it's made with almond flour. I made it with chickpea flour, it lowered it to 373. So if you eat half of it, that's about 150 calories to 200 calories a person. The protein is 14 grams. The carbohydrates are 39, so it's a little high for a diabetic. But again, if they just have a little sample of it, it's probably going to be okay. The sugar grams is 26. The fiber is 5. The sodium is 70. So the sodium is actually pretty low because we're not really adding anything that has a lot of sodium in it. If you were using something like butter, it would probably be higher. So by substituting the coconut oil, we're cutting the sodium. So I'm going to go ahead and bake that in the microwave. One of the things that we can top it off, this is the time of year where we have seasonal ingredients. So one of the toppings that I suggested today was strawberries because there's a lot of fresh strawberries in the grocery store right now. So I would go ahead and try to top it off with some berries. You could add a sprinkle of some powdered sugar or some Ready Whip. Again, the real thing, no Cool Whip. Cool Whip is nothing but toxic ingredients. But just a little dab of something and you've really got yourself a healthy, quick and easy dessert, okay? Does anybody have any questions? A pretty quick and easy, fun experiment? Those of you that are trying the substitutions, shoot me an email and tell me how it went because I haven't actually tried it, okay? You can go ahead and unmute if you want, if you have questions.
Yeah, we're gonna try a couple of things and we'll let you know how it goes.
Sounds good.
We'll try the vanilla and the strawberry and see what happens.
All right, and then don't forget the fresh fruit.
We've got raspberries and blackberries.
Nice. That sounds yummy. All right, you guys, thanks for joining in. I'll see you next week. I think next week we're going to do zucchini pizza boats, okay?